What is up, guys? Your boy DFS Jimmy back again for another edition of the Fanshare Sports Early Week Course Preview. Currently, at the time of recording, Brooks Koepka is cruising on his way to another major championship, currently leading his pal Dustin Johnson by 5 strokes halfway through the course. So, figured I would get started since the end seems to be predetermined for the PGA Championship. This is going to be the second post-major course preview video of the season. This week we are traveling to Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area. The Colonial is on tap for the Fort Worth Invitational. Been several different course names or several different tournament names over the years. Course, however, has been the same for many years. Got a lot of course history to draw upon this week. And really a pretty interesting track in Colonial for the guys coming up following the PGA Championship in its new time slot. But what has stayed consistent here as well is Fanshare Sports and me. So make sure you get over to fansharesports.com, check those guys out. Also, make sure you hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button so you know when we drop our videos each and every week. A lot of cool things planned for NFL season as well. We know that you guys don't just play one sport, you play them all. Fanshare's got you covered. So make sure you hit that button. And if you're not a Fanshare Pro member already, go ahead and hit over there and use code Jimmy, all lowercase, get you a discount and you get into all of the information that you guys want. So without any further ado, let us get into the breakdown for Colonial. As usual, we're going to take a look at the card, and then we're going to take a look at the guys that have had success here at this track over the years, see if we can pinpoint a type of game that is successful around this track. We will also take a look at my model based on hole length. Without any further ado, let's get into the course. Behind me, this is the 18th hole at Colonial. I want to highlight a couple of things here. First of all, Colonial is a par 70, very old school design, tree line, parkland style golf course in the flatlands of Fort Worth. Not a lot of elevation change throughout. The elevation that you're going to see most on this course are elevated greens as the one you see behind me, with quite a few runoffs. Very few water hazards on the course. This is Texas after all. 3 to 4 water hazards come into play, and that's about it. The rest of the track is made difficult by the bunkering. 84 bunkers to be exact, laid out around this track. Very old school design, originally built in 1936. Tough golf course, and it's tough for a couple of reasons. One, the old school design makes it much more of a strategic style golf course than a bombers type of golf course. It really is one of those tracks that kind of opens itself up to any type of game to find success here, and a lot of that has to do with the game off of the tee. They generally have thick Bermuda rough. Bermuda rough, very difficult to play out of, creates a lot of flyers, a lot of unpredictable lies, a lot of unpredictable launches out of the rough. Makes it very difficult to control for these guys. So premium definitely on finding the fairway at this track. The fairways here at Colonial average 5 to 6 yards narrower in the landing zones than the tour average. So definitely a premium on positioning off of the tee. A tough golf course to play from the rough. And it's really a less than driver golf course despite the 7,200 yard length, par 70 we have. That's right, par 70, 7,200 yards. One of the longer par 70s players face this year except for the majors. And it is one of those tracks that like I said earlier, it really does allow kind of anybody that's clicking on their game to find success, given that you can find the fairway. Bombers, John Rahm has made a bit of an argument against a Bombers track in his 2 appearances here. He has been very aggressive with his driver, and also while he's been aggressive with his driver, has also found success at the top of the leaderboard both years he's played here. So there are a number of ways you can attack this golf course. I would say cautiously aggressive off of the tee is maybe the most appropriate for winners of this tournament throughout the years. You need to know when to take out the big stick, when to take your shots. A lot of dog legs. just one of those tracks that's it's very much about strategy and positioning more than it is anything else. You need to be able to work the ball both ways. It doesn't really set up well for one type of hitter or another, and you'll see in the model as we get into this a bit later, the model likes some guys that theoretically are conservative players, and find a lot of fairways and all. But the model, the top 4 or 5 guys in the model have not found success here at this track. So a bit diametrically opposed to the model from real world results. But we're going to get into all that here in just a minute. Did want to highlight this. We'll also highlight one of the toughest par 3s that players are going to face this week. Very long, all carry over water. As you see, almost no bailout to the right, no bailout to the left, no bailout long. If you're left or you're long, you're in a bunker. If you're short or you're right, you're in the water. That is kind of how Colonial sets up. The greens are small. The fairways are narrow, a lot of trouble to be found throughout with regard to the rough, and you can't hold these greens coming out of the rough. Tends to play pretty firm. Oh yeah, it's Texas. It's windy. Average wind, 10 miles an hour. Average gusts, 25. Wind is almost always a factor here at Colonial, as it is almost always a factor at any Texas golf course. So wind will likely affect players one or more days throughout this week. Took a quick peek at the forecast. Looks like we could be in for a bit gustier conditions than we have seen in the past, at least the past couple of years, and a pretty steady winds throughout all 4 days. So as you're building your player pool, take a look at good wind players. Take a look at guys that are able to control their irons, or are able to control their balls within the wind. The Aussies tend to play very well in Texas as a general rule. Due to that, they tend to play well in the wind, tend to be very used to the style of golf that Texas requires. So let's get into the card. Let's get into where players are going to score, where they're going to struggle, and how we're going to score DraftKings points. Because finish position, while heavily weighted for DraftKings, does not tell the whole story. And we frequently see players that outscore the field average in birdies find their way into winning lineups. So let's look for where players are going to find birdies. Short story, not many of them to be found out here at Colonial, at least not for most of the field. The top tier guys obviously are going to win. The average winning score here, 14 under. That said, that's average, because we've seen 20 under win here, and we've seen 9 under win here. So depends on the conditions. Very, very dependent track on conditions. We don't see a lot of rain in the forecast right now, so we could set up for some firm, fast golf courses, or a firm, fast golf course this week, which really could allow some of the shorter hitters to take advantage and could wreak havoc on maybe some of the more aggressive players off of the tee. Won't be able to hold the fairways, play a lot of shots from the rough. That said, they might be quite a bit closer. But these greens are tiny firm greens, very difficult to hold out of this Bermuda rough. It's no joke, guys. So there are only 2 par 5s to be found. The par 5s account for 20% of all DraftKings scoring, and they are obviously the easiest group of holes to score on. As you see right here, they average just under 0.6 of a stroke under par, but there's only 2 of them, and they're both very long. The first hole is potentially a 2-shot par 5, but for the most part, it is a 3-shot hole. And the number 11, 635 yards, definitely a 3-shot hole. Guys are not reaching that thing in 2. It's just kind of the way it is. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of elevated greens around here, a lot of runoffs, a lot of false fronts. You really do need to be aiming for the center of the green around this golf course. And guys are gonna favor position and precision over power this week. I think even if you listen to some of the old interviews with John Rahm, despite his aggressive nature around this golf course, even he says that you have to favor precision. So make sure that you're looking for guys that know how to play tough, strategic golf courses. And I think you'll see in the course history that we look at later on today that bears out in the results year after year as well. So the first hole, 565 yards, definitely an opportunity to score. Second hole, short par 4, opportunity to score. Then it's a whole bunch of bogeys waiting to happen. One scoreable hole on the back 9, then a whole bunch of bogeys. It's a tough golf course, guys. Even though it only averages .01 over par, it is very dependent on the weather. And how the course gets set up year in and year out. You will notice that the par threes, all very difficult, all play over par, as well as a really big chunk of this golf course is 400 to 450 yards. If you're going to focus on a range of holes that your players need to succeed at this week, it's that range. Those mid to long par fours make up a huge chunk of this golf course, and the player that's going to win this week is going to outpace the field right here on this category. The short par fours, they're kind of a gift. And anybody can kind of score on them. The long par fours, anybody can make a bogey, anybody can make a par. It's right here in the middle that the players are going to separate themselves. The par fives, as I mentioned, very much three-shot holes. Not going to find a lot of eagles here. You really are going to have a three-shot type of par five setup this week. So this is where you need to be focused. 400 to 450, that tells the story about this golf course by and large. So make sure you're looking at guys that excel at this range. As you can see, a difficult course that does not yield a ton of birdies, very little green across the birdie averages, even the par fives, with the exception of the first. The 11th, just under 27% of the field's making a birdie here. You compare that to the rest of the tour, and it's very, very low. So really, there's only one very scoreable par five. The other one, it's really kind of like you just got to get a drive in the fairway, get you a layup shot in there, get a tight wedge, hope you have a shot at birdie. That's how these par fives play. So don't focus too much on the par fives. Focus on that 400 to 450 yard par four scoring. That tells the story about Colonial. Interesting track Colonial is. A lot of fun golf is had here. And for your players that are really clicking this week, they can go low. They can find some birdies. As I mentioned, some of the winning scores do trend towards the 17 to 20 under, generally on softer golf courses, generally in a bit softer conditions with low wind. This week we are looking at slightly firmer, windier conditions, probably find ourselves in that 12 to 15 under range for a winner this week if conditions hold true. Make sure you pay attention to the weather, specifically to stacking waves this week. This is Texas. We can get weather that wipes out a whole wave if there's a big disparity in tee times and weather conditions. So make sure you pay attention to that as we're getting closer to lock. Could find a big edge there this week being in Texas. Moving on from the course, let's get into course history. Find out what players have had success here. Find out which players haven't had so much success here. So I've got average finish and adjusted finish position here for when players have not played, but do want to show you the model first. So my model, which is based on hole length and performance by hole length, as I mentioned, it shows the top three golfers. While you think they would perform well here, have not really performed well. Tony Finau, you think, could take the Jon Rahm approach, kind of cover the field with his distance, and put himself in great position. While he's number one ranked in my model, has not found strong finishes here. A lot of that probably has to do with finding the rough off of the tee, being a bit more aggressive than he should be, and maybe not being as tight with his approaches as maybe he is this year. Tony did not play last year, so we don't really know when he had his breakout season if his irons and maybe a little more tameness off of the tee would have helped him. But Tony has not been able to convert his elite distance into strong finishing position. That said, he has outpaced the field in DraftKings points when he's played. Jim Furyk, you would think a strategic positioning type of course would set up very, very well for Jim over the years. But we look at the last 5 years, Jim has not played twice, missed the cut once, and then only had two finishes inside just outside the top 50, inside top 70. So while you think that Jim would set up well here, has not played all that great. Jason Kokrak, another one, extremely solid ball striker, possesses plenty of length off of the tee, should have the game to contend around this track, has not been able to put it together. Although he's playing much better this year than past, hard to say whether or not that translates. Jon Rahm, finding himself number 4 in my model. You see where he's dominated this track the last 2 years, taking a really aggressive approach off of the tee, hitting driver where others elect to lay back. In my adjusted model, he's a little further down, still inside the top 10 or top 12, I think. But in my raw average finish model, In the 2 times he's played here, he has absolutely crushed it. So look for Jon Rahm to continue that aggressive nature, and let's see if it pays off for him 3 years in a row. Moving down, Zach Johnson, bit more conservative, definitely does not have the length or the firepower that a guy like Jon Rahm or Kokrak or Finau have, but has found himself when playing well with a couple of top 20 finishes, also found himself with a couple of missed cuts when not playing well. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is very much a track that if you're playing within yourself and you're playing strong, solid golf with your approaches, just about any player on tour can find success here. Doesn't mean they can score a bunch of DraftKings points here, but they can definitely score with regard to finishing position. Just looking at the adjusted average finish model, let's look at consistency over 5 years. Average finish, factoring in guys that have not played. If you didn't play for a year, you get a 70. If you missed a cut, you get a 75. You look at some of these guys that have found consistency. No surprise, Jordan Spieth, Texas native, knows how to play Texas golf, had a string of really strong performances, had a lackluster 2018, but he kind of did everywhere else too. Seems to be getting it going in 2019. In contention, I say in contention, nobody's really contending with Brooks, but in contention this week at the PGA. Could see Jordan Spieth finding some of that 15, 16, 17 form coming in this week. Brian Harman found a lot of success here at this track. Lefty, there might be something with the lefty aspect on how this course sets up, but kind of the player that plays within himself, can drop some long putts, generally has a pretty good wedge and iron game to go along with it. Danny Lee, same thing. Actually, Danny Lee showed a bit of mettle here in day 1 of the PGA Championship. Interesting to see how Danny Lee sets up this week. But you look at players that have had success year in and year out, and you kind of got a hodgepodge. What you don't see though are any bombers. Right? You have to go all the way down to Jon Rahm, number 14 on the list, to find a bomber. Everybody else tends to be your run-of-the-mill type of distance guys, find themselves in great positions in the fairway, able to attack some of these pins. Very difficult to attack this golf course when you're not in the fairway. Good drive percentage is a strong stat to look at this week. I have not pulled up the stats for good drive percentage, but finding the fairway, finding the green, very important to finding success here at Colonial. All these guys do that very well. You look at Jimmy Walker, Charlie Hoffman, both good win players. Bill Haas, great par 70 player, never going to light up a golf course, but makes pars like nobody else, and is able to hang around year after year after year at this track. Obviously, the model doesn't like him based on hole length, but, it's the type of track that, like I said, just about any golfer can play well at if they're playing well. You just have to play within yourself. You cannot overpower this golf course. Despite Jon Rahm's aggressive approach, you cannot overpower this golf course. You do have to play within your game, within yourself, and you need to take what the golf course gives you. And that changes drastically at a course like Colonial with the weather. So players that can adapt, players that are not focused on trying to be too aggressive, but more focused on the consistency aspect, tend to play better at this track year in and year out. Do want to highlight average finish by position. Justin Rose hadn't played this course in a really long time. Came out here, showed everybody up, won last year. Justin Rose, longer than average, obviously finds a lot of fairways, but one of the best long iron ball strikers in the game. Joaquin Niemann, he had a great 2018 last year in this Texas stretch. Had never played this course before, but played within himself. Joaquin Niemann, very much a bomber, can hit it out there past a lot of guys on tour, but he has a great long iron game when it's on. He displayed that last year. Already talked about Jordan Spieth. A lot of these first timers played well here last year. This is one of the weaker fields on tour, especially this year after the major. But it is one of the more fun fields, that you see some of your longer shots come up and play well. Perfect for DraftKings style events. Again, generally not a birdie fest. Emiliano Grillo, very interesting results for Grillo. Has consistently improved year after year. Grillo, much better bent grass putter than he is anything else. And this course sets up well for him because Grillo is one of those very straight ball hitters. Doesn't take too much, doesn't bite off too much more than he can chew. Tends to have a lower ball flight, plays well in the winds. And just, that very consistent long iron game. That's the type of player you're looking for around this track. Graham McDowell, Actually, very interesting. Been playing well this year. Very interested to see what he can do at a track like this that in my opinion, suits his game well. Model likes him top 20. Brant, not sure Brant's healthy right now. Model, of course, doesn't know that, but either way, this type of golf Brant plays and being good in the wind with his long irons obviously should rank well in the model. Andrew Putnam, interesting to see him up there with number 10 in the model. But you scroll down, guy like Kevin Tway, one miscut, didn't play for a couple of years, then a couple of top 20s and a top 5 even. Bomber is Kevin Tway. Certainly can take advantage, if his irons are on and he's able to find the fairway, especially when he decides to pull out the driver. Kevin Tway can definitely put himself in some advantageous positions in these shorter par fours, even the mid-length par fours. Give himself a shorter iron in, higher ball flight, can maybe stop it closer to a pin. But interested to see how he plays. Kevin Na. This is the type of course you would expect to see Kevin Na play well at. Don't have to be terribly long. Baked out or dry conditions allow his drives to run out. Great long iron ball striker and been putting pretty well as of late. Charlie Hoffman, another guy, plays well in the wind, always has, seems to play well in Texas. Went to college at UNLV, used to playing in the desert type, lowland conditions, lots of wind. Paul Casey ranking 6th in the model. Definitely agree with the model here. He's had mixed results at this track, but again, this is a tough track. That said, Casey, when he is on, is maybe exactly the type of player you expect to play well at a course like Colonial. Great ball striker, not short off of the tee, but not crazy long, and tends to not make too many mistakes, and makes a lot of pars, right? That's the type of game that's likely going to find itself in the mix for contention on a Sunday. Ricky Fowler, another one of those same type of players as Paul Casey, doesn't win a lot, but very clutch, saves lots of pars, great long iron game, and we know Ricky can play well in the wind. He's the type of golfer you would expect to see the model like, and the type of golfer you would expect to see play well at a track like this. Some of the guys that the model, some other guys that the model likes, maybe I don't agree with or sort of puzzling. Matt Jones, although it is a Texas course, Matt Jones does tend to play well in Texas, despite his mixed results here at this track. Jim Furyk, we already talked about him. Johnny Vegas, bit surprising to not see better results for a guy like Johnny Vegas. Great long iron ball striker, tends to play really well on tracks that demand good ball striking. His putter just tends to let him down, but with these small greens, you'd think he'd play better than his results suggest. Interested to see how he does this week. We scroll down, there's a whole lot of first-timers here, and we saw last year first-timers play really well. You look at some of these names in the first-timer list, and you get kind of excited as to who could potentially jump up and find themselves in the mix. Alexander Noren, underrated player in my opinion, and he runs hot, runs cold. Interested to see how he can play on a course like this. Not a lot of water. Would think Noren could go well. Sungjae Im, I really like Sungjae Im this week in a track that tends to be a bit windy, tends to be a tougher golf course, and we've seen in this year so far since he's been on tour, those are the courses that Im has played well at and found success. Like Im a lot this week. Interested to see how he goes in his first time around here. Grace, On, Molinari, Fitzpatrick, all games that seem to be tailor-made to a track like this. Sliding just outside the top 25 in the model for all of these guys, but all guys that play well in the wind, great ball strikers with their long irons, and they all tend to have a fairly straight tee to green game, very strong tee to green. Grace probably the weakest of that bunch currently, but would not be surprised to see any one of these guys play extremely well in their maiden edition here, at least in the last 5 years. Maiden trips to Colonial. And there's a lot of talent wrapped up down here. They're guys that know course history. So might get a bit lower ownership on some of these guys. It's easy to see why the model doesn't like some of these players down here, and they've never played the course. They all tend to rely a bit more on their driver than they should, tend to overpower courses. Cameron Champ, obviously, I mean, the guy's just absolutely killing it off the tee. That aspect of his game is going to be virtually lost here at Colonial. So really need to focus on the ball strikers and the guys that can keep it in play, position themselves perfectly, and use strategy to their advantage to navigate around this track for all 4 days, as well as contend with the wind. So that is my breakdown for the Colonial. I'll shift it one more time so you can see what my model likes. Again, don't necessarily agree with the top 3 or 4 in the model, but do agree as the model works its way down. The top 20, interested to see how some of these guys go. Russell Knox, probably a guy I'll have several shares of this week. Couple of strong performances, played some decent golf earlier this year, and does know how to play in the wind, can get creative on fast tracks, coming from his links background. So, ladies and gentlemen, your boy, DFS Jimmy, signing off for Fanshare Sports. Don't forget to give the video a like. Go to fansharesports.com. Check those guys out. Best of luck this week. We'll see you next week.